Welcome to the Flow State Podcast, where we're all about finding balance. We're your hosts, Monica Groney
and Norah Candido. Now let's get into the flow. Welcome back, Flow State listeners. We are so happy to have you back in this season 4. It's so wild. We have a really awesome guest with us today. We have Nicole, who is a certified health coach. She's also a writer, speaker, and mentor, and she's authored Fix Your Period, 6 Weeks to Banish Bloating, Conquer Cramps, Manage Moodiness, and Ignite Lasting Hormone Balance, all things that we are a fan of here. She's also a mentor, the creator and founder of the Institute for Menstrual Health, and we are just so grateful to have you here today. She also has her own podcast, so she is an expert in all things podcasting, and we're really excited to have this conversation with you today, Nicole. So thank you for being here.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. I can't wait to dive into our conversation.
Nicole has been a mentor even to me. I've been through her program and it has been amazing to learn from her. So it is really exciting to have her on the podcast today and have her be able to share directly with our community here. So Nicole, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what inspired you or how you kind of got into this whole women's health and hormone sector.
Oh yes, where do I begin? It's been a journey, and I'm sure it has been for you, both of you as well. For me, I think the inspiration showed up really early on, but I didn't even realize it. I remember getting my period and being prepared for it. And I remember I was spotting in the lead up to it. And I had pads in my backpack. And I remember having this conversation with my mom. And I was like so intuitive. And then somewhere along the way, I lost all that intuition. Don't know what happened. But anyway, so I remember just all of those and one of my friends finding the pads in my backpack and being like, do you have your period? And being really upset that I hadn't told her. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just preparing. But it was just like one of those things where from an early age, like clearly this was something that I was into and I didn't even realize it. And then I started having all of these problems probably around 14 or 15. My period started to go crazy. I really started to have these major bouts of pain, really heavy flow, and awful moodiness. I was just like a mess. I was kind of like the poster child for period problems. And that was when I started to talk to my mom about it, and she was like, well, I had really horrible periods too, so I think this is just kind of what you have to deal with. And that was it, really. I mean, that was the extent of the advice. And so I finally saw my mom's gynecologist, and she decided to put me on the pill for all of my period woes. And that, I think, was really a turning point because, first of all, it made me feel like this is great. I now have a regular period. I now have pain-free periods. It's not that heavy. My moods are all stable now. So I felt like I'd found a solution. Yeah. I mean, I feel like somebody of us can relate to that. and then the pill screwed me. It was like 2-3 years into it, I started to have all of these, what felt like seemingly unrelated side effects. And the side effects ranged from hair loss to painful sex, to vaginal dryness, to chronic yeast infections, UTIs, like joint pain. I could go on and on. I had melasma like all over my face. I remember a dermatologist telling me that at least you're still pretty. I know, ridiculous. And sometimes, this is just the stuff that happens to us, and it is what it is, kind of thing. I remember feeling like I just heard that a lot throughout the process of trying to find solutions and answers to all these symptoms that I had while being on the pill. It was just kind of like, well, this is just your lot in life, or, these things just happen sometimes. Yeah, not a lot of explanations. And I mean, I ended up doing a colonoscopy because I had such horrible digestive issues on the pill. They tested me for rheumatoid arthritis. Like, I could go on. And it was multiple doctors, multiple years. And then I ended up in the ER with an allergic reaction to a UTI medication. And I'm sitting there, like 104 fever, bright red hives all over my body. And the next day I'm in college. And so the next day I go to school, and a friend of mine who's been trying to get me to see her acupuncturist for a million years was like, okay, are you going to go now? So okay, fine, shoot, I'll go to see your acupuncturist. And that was really the first time someone explained it to me what could be going on. It was a shock. And you know what's so hilarious is that he explains this in such amazingly simple terms, and I'm like, yeah, I don't believe you. I was like, the pill, no way. And well, here we are. So, you know, that really was for me, I think, like seeing that acupuncturist over 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago now, was the catalyst, I think, for this journey. And so suddenly I was trying all these different health modalities, and I was changing my diet and taking all these Chinese herbs and doing all of these things. And then having conversations with a lot of other people in my life about the issues I was dealing with and the things they had problems with. And, you know, and it just naturally unfolded. And so yeah, I ended up doing training and working towards writing this book and doing all these other things. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. But it's been a long journey for sure.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with a lot of that, which is, it's just so sad. And like how often I hear that from other people too. And they find just so much validation from hearing us say the same things when like they think that they're crazy, or they just feel so isolated and alone in this experience. But it is so incredibly common, which is tragic. Like, when is it going to sink in? When are providers going to stop using this as our first line of birth control? Like, why don't we empower people and give them the knowledge? Like, there are so many things that we can do.
It's so hard though too, because our providers just don't have the time to do like what all of us here do, of actually educating on the lifestyle improvements and the small steps that can make big impacts. They don't have the time to get people to like stay on those regimens. And so the world really needs the people like us who are like spreading this. But Nicole, I'd be super curious to hear, like, what was it that acupuncturist said to you about birth control that really made it click for you? Because I'm sure that there are even people listening who are in the position of like, wait, what is it about birth control that I should know that I don't know? So what was that really kind of like made you be like, oh my God?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the first thing he said to me was, well, he asked if I was on the pill. I filled out a form and I said yes. And that was funny because I don't know that really anyone had asked that in a way that they were trying to actually figure things out. So he asked that, and then we had a conversation about it. I'll never forget. He goes, so you're on the pill. And it felt almost accusatory at the time. And I said, yes, I am. And I've been on it, you know, since I was 18, 19, something like that. So it's been about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And so he then said to me, well, I think the pill is part of the problems that you're experiencing. And that's when I looked at him and I was like, dude, please give me a break, you know? But honestly, it's like hilarious to me when I think about all the things I had been through, the fact that no one had even questioned it. And so he was the first one, like I said. And so I said, okay, well, why would that be? And so then he started to explain that, you know, the pill prevents pregnancy by inhibiting ovulation, and which is, you know, the release of the egg from the ovary. And you know, and basically it does this by suppressing the hormones that come from the brain that trigger, you know, the maturation of the egg in the ovary. And so I was like, okay. And so he was just like, so it's doing that. And what it's doing is it's stopping all the production of these hormones that you really need for so many aspects of your health. I'm obviously paraphrasing, but that was essentially the gist of it. So that was really the first time in my life, and I'm in my early 20s at this point, that I'd really heard anything like that. And I think that that's so relatable for so many women, right? It's like nobody has ever said anything like that to me. I never even got this kind of information when I was prescribed the pill. I mean, I remember when I went to my gynecologist, she just wrote a prescription for me right as after I finished saying to her all of these problems that I was experiencing, and never once, I don't think ever, said anything to me about any adverse effects ever. And so I think that that's so relatable universally for so many people who are prescribed this thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and just really unfortunate again. And glad we have platforms, and hopefully we are a part of this change now. And yeah, I'm curious, what was your experience like in then coming off of the pill?
I feel like thankfully I had this information. And so I understood now, okay, this is what the pill is doing. And I really used the acupuncture, the dietary lifestyle changes, and the stress management practices and the herbal remedies that he was giving me as a bit of a buffer. So I felt like I was really able to cushion the transition off of the pill. And so when I did come off of it, really I was terrified naturally, but I knew that I was in good hands. And so I remember coming off of it, and because I was in it's like sort of finishing up college at the time. So I had just had my last pack. I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to take this last pack and see what happens. And so when I did, I remember for the first time ever, really, since my early teenage years, having a period that didn't just completely take me out. And so I thought, okay, this is good, right? I'll just keep going with this and see what happens. So it really was incredibly validating once I came off the pill to see that, oh, actually, all these things do work.
And now in your practice, do you experience a lot of like women, females, girls coming to you kind of in that same scenario of wanting to come off the pill?
Yeah, I really did for a long time. So many women, at all ages, from like 20 onwards. And what I've seen more so now in the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, are a lot of women being either just on the pill after having children in their 30s, and then they're just on it through their 40s, and they're told to just stay on it for perimenopause symptoms, and so, or to treat those symptoms. And so now I'm just seeing a huge increase in women in their 40s who are just on the pill, and then they stay on it into their early 50s. So that's quite shocking. But I've really seen a massive uptick in that.
And do you think that there's just a connection between people not realizing like that same thing that we've all experienced with birth control of like not really understanding what it's doing or the effect that it's having on us, and not knowing the other option? Is it just like an awareness issue where these women are staying on the pill, or they're just following the recommendation of their doctor?
I think it's probably a combination of things. I mean, I'm sure both of you have encountered this so many times where someone says to you, or many people say to you, I just had no idea. If someone had said something to me, they told me that this was, there were so many side effects, or this is how these oral contraceptives affect me or affect my body, I really might have made a different decision. And then there's, of course, like the information, it's either the lack of information or the information that's withheld around alternatives. Not that we have like a wide array of amazing alternatives, but I feel like there are other options. And I find that like the vast majority of women just have no idea about alternatives. They have no idea about what they were really signing up for. Just such a lack of informed consent. And yeah, like I think that when you're told to just stay on the pill in your 40s, if you've been sort of in the hamster wheel, I suppose you could say, of conventional medicine, then you kind of just keep going with that, right? You just sort of stick with what you know. And so I found that to be the case as well.
Yeah, when I hear that, it's so weird to think about turning the body's hormone production system on like a faucet, like just turning it on and off. Like, okay, like you want to get pregnant, come off the pill, have the baby. Now let's go back on the pill to prevent another pregnancy. And like, yes, in theory, that is how it can work. It does not always work for a lot of people that way, and that it takes a lot of time to recalibrate and your body to start making its own hormones and re-regulate itself. But I mean, I really want to dive in today about really like the benefits around ovulation and things that we're all alluding to in this conversation. And I'm just curious to know, obviously from your experience and helping tens of thousands of people, what are some of the most common period symptoms or problems that you see on the day-to-day?
I agree with you, and I would say that the most common problems I see, just in my experience, either in my practice or on social media and in my inbox and whatnot, are irregular cycles. So irregular ovulation, surprise, surprise, and with that comes, but the thing is they don't even realize, right? Like they don't even necessarily know they have irregular cycles. It's just what I'm deducing from what they're saying. But with that comes two very heavy periods and long periods. So they're just, bleeding for 7, 10, 12, 20 days in some cases. And then also I'm really starting to, and then also period pain and mood changes and emotional changes with their cycles. So I'd say those are like the top ones that I see. And then I'm really starting to see so much more what is called primary ovarian insufficiency, or premature ovarian failure is what it used to be called. And so that's really just, and again, like really what that comes down to is ovarian dysfunction, right? So we're really just seeing a lot of ovarian dysfunction, generally speaking. And of course, it manifests as various symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see that as just like this brain to ovary connection. And again, when birth control is just severing that communication pathway, how can we help to reestablish, have the brain sending the signals to the ovary to grow the follicle, nurture it, release the egg, all of the things. And honestly, for me, the biggest thing I think this all boils down to is stress. I think stress is like the leading cause of a lot of the disruptions that we see in women's cycles. And yeah, it's inherent. It's a part of our world. We can't escape it. I don't see it's an unavoidable. It's just knowing what are some things that we can do to help support your body and help it to feel safe. Like we have to be able to recreate and send that signal to the body that like, okay, we actually can expend energy. We can procreate. We can have a child. We can grow a human. We have those extra resources. Whereas if we're in this fight or flight, go, 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 nonstop mentality, of course the body's not going to be priming us and being like, yes, this is the perfect time.
Exactly right. And not to mention all of the side effects that hormonal birth control, particularly the pill, because I'd say that's the one that's most well studied, but the increasing of markers of chronic inflammation and impaired insulin sensitivity, and then just the effects on the gut, the microbiome, liver function, the gallbladder, thyroid, adrenals, nutrient stores. I mean, we could go on and on. And so we're not only working against the unprecedented levels of stress in our society right now, but we are also addressing all of these problems that have likely shown up from using hormonal birth control for much longer than it was ever intended for, and at much younger ages too, because in 1970, women were not being put on the pill at 12 for migraines or heavy bleeding or period pain, at least not that I am aware of. Whereas now, I heard a story the other day. A woman told me that she was put on the pill at 8 for migraines. And I was like, wait, what? So that to me is incomprehensible, because all I was thinking was, wait, you hadn't gone through puberty yet. So what was the thought process in all of this? So I just think that, and again, I don't want to sound defeatist in any way, but I think that it's so important for us to be aware of the contraceptive effects on, all of these various body systems. And then on top of it, the fact that, we have all of the external stressors, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, it's not even just birth control either. I mean, I think we obviously talk about birth control a lot being female focused, but I think a lot of things are overprescribed, and all of those medications have effects on the bodily systems, the liver, our nutrient stores, and it's just how our medicine has been for the last 50 plus years of, oh, you have a problem, here's a prescription. So people are not just on birth control, but they're also on an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety, ADHD medicine, and some of those things totally essential. I'm not demonizing these in any way. It's just that our medical system has also been breaking down the natural process of the body as well.
So true. It's so true. I mean, it's such a problem. And yeah, I agree. I have these conversations with uh, people in my community and other practitioners, particularly about especially younger women and how many women in their mid 20s who we're seeing who are being referred for IVF because they are not able to get pregnant. Unfortunately, I feel like that's just their, again, like the pill, right? IVF seems to be the first line of defense with fertility problems, as you've seen, and that is obviously hugely problematic. But that is shocking, and sort of the level of complication in these patients that I don't really recall seeing just even 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And now I feel like it's just so commonplace to have like multiple complications, whereas before I felt like my cases were a lot more simple.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that a lot in my own personal circles of just knowing so many more people. And even we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but the narrative around like, oh, you should get your AMH or your egg levels checked, whereas that is not the best or most accurate measure of your chance of conceiving. Even if you have a lower AMH number, you can still have amazing quality eggs and have no issue. But just kind of instilling this narrative of like, it's going to be hard for you. It's going to be difficult to get pregnant. Oh, you should freeze your eggs now. And like all I see is just dollar signs popping up over these providers' heads, and it's like an opportunity. But if I could just tell any of these people of like, that doesn't have to be your story. Like, do what is the most supportive thing for you. Like, do the things that are in your power, whatever that can be. Just don't fall victim into, oh, this narrative. Like, I don't think a lot of them have the best interest for people, which is really sad.
Yeah, preach. I agree with you completely. I know, and I really struggle with this. I really do, because I feel like for us, we really are walking a very fine line of empowering women to, make more informed choices, and at the same time, we're coming up against a multi-trillion trillion maybe industry. When we combine the pharmaceutical companies and the fertility industry and all of it, and it's so challenging because we're so conditioned to want that quick fix, that fast solution. And apparently even getting pregnant and having a baby falls into that category. And it's so problematic. And so I feel like our work is doubly hard because we're trying to convince women, well, this is what you really need. And this is what you actually need for healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby and a healthy child post having that baby. It's just, there's so much that goes into it. And because people have been left in the dark for so long, you have to re-educate them, and that it's really hard to do that, I found.
Yeah. And a healthy mama.
Yes, and a healthy mama, exactly, right? I know. Too many tangents. But it's true.
It is true. So yeah, we talked about, like, I see a lot of these as well. Irregular cycles, longer cycles, or really long, heavy bleeds, just kind of all over the place. And we talk about luteal phase defect, and I would love to just dive in a little bit more into this topic today and some of those common problems that we do see and how we support them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So luteal phase defect or deficiency, I usually say deficiency, trying to move away from the defect thing, that, so many women feel defective already. Not that, there's anything wrong with using the term because that's technically the term, but, that's one of the things I see so much of, right? We were talking about the irregular cycles or irregular ovulation, and and again too, like I always try to say to women who I work with, like your ovulation and your hormones aren't really the problem. They're just sort of the signs of the problem. They're the signs of the underlying problems or the causes of them. And so I'm always saying, like, there are contributing factors to this. And so luteal phase deficiency is essentially when you have a luteal phase that's shorter than 10 days. So basically 9 days or less. And that to me indicates that ovulation is occurring potentially, but it's not healthy. It's not coming from a healthy follicle. And what is always so shocking to the women I talk to is that that tiny little follicle, it's like, it produces an egg that's one cell thick, is responsible for producing all of the progesterone in your whole cycle. And they're always amazed by that. And so that's really what we have to focus on. Like, what's causing your ovary to not be healthy? Why is it that that follicle it doesn't have the capacity to produce enough progesterone to make sure that luteal phase is at least 10 days long. And so, just so everyone knows, when that little follicle bursts open and the egg comes out into the fallopian tube, it lasts for 12 to 24 hours and then disintegrates, or there'll be a pregnancy. It'll meet up with a little sperm cell. But that follicle where the egg came from is now producing all of that progesterone. And that progesterone in the second half of your cycle is basically the determinant for when you get your next period, right? So like if you're making enough progesterone, then your luteal phase will be a good healthy 12 to 14 days in most cases. And if you're not, then it will be shorter than that. And so progesterone is like the indicator to your uterine lining when it should start to shed. And so that's really where we run into problems. Like I said, we're running into issues with the ovarian follicle health, the health of the ovary overall, and everything we were talking about, right? Like the stress and our environment and our nutrient deficiencies and everything that the pill affects that is affected by our environment in general. All of those impact our ovaries. And so I feel like there's a bit of re-education that really needs to happen, in the sense that not only do we have to explain like how all of this works, but also like I want everyone to understand that all of your life choices will impact, like everything is connected. Like the whole system is like one big web. And if you touch a spider web in one spot, it'll cause problems all over the spider web. So I think that that's really something that we should know about, right? Because conventional medicine makes us think that all of our body systems are just sort of siloed off and one doesn't affect the other. Particularly, when you think about going to a specialist, like you go to an OBGYN or you go to a GI doctor or you go to a dermatologist or whatever, and GI, OBGYN, dermatologist, they're all connected. All of those things, those systems in the body are connected, and yet no one's really talking to each other. So I think that it's really important for us to remember that, if anything, if nothing.
And beyond, like with the luteal phase deficiency, beyond just like having shorter periods, shorter luteal phase, are there symptoms associated too that will come along for someone who's experiencing that like lower progesterone production?
Yeah, I mean, so it could be that it's lower progesterone production, or it's progesterone that's dropping prematurely before our actual period. And so, oftentimes, and when we think of progesterone, the progestation hormone, it's obviously helpful for pregnancy, but it's also so crucial for like pretty much every system in the body, but particularly brain and cognitive function, emotional health and reasoning, as well as our moods. And so when we think about the emotional symptoms that come in the second half of our cycle, there's no wonder to me that we're in an epidemic of women experiencing all kinds of emotional issues and mental and emotional issues in that second half of their cycle, because we're in an epidemic of low or progesterone, or sort of like dysfunctional progesterone production, is what I've found. And so oftentimes, like I said, it's mental, emotional symptoms, but there can be other physical symptoms too. Unfortunately, with progesterone, high progesterone and low progesterone kind of have the same symptoms. So things like bloating and weight gain and just a feeling of like putting all this water weight on. So a lot of like those heavy type feelings and low energy, things like that tend to be symptoms that will show up. But also from a physical perspective, when you think of your period, what I tend to see a lot of too is spotting before your period. So spotting for 3, 5, 10 days, sometimes your entire luteal phase, you're just spotting before your period begins. So those are some of the things. And then also like physically, migraines, headaches, cramping before your period, because progesterone is a very potent anti-inflammatory hormone. So when we lose it, that menstrual cycle, like the kickoff of the menstrual cycle, really is like an inflammatory event. And so we find ourselves feeling all of those symptoms associated with inflammation in a heightened way. And then the other thing I think about a lot too is I hear this often from women who have more sort of chronic mental health related conditions like ADHD and PMDD. They just so it's so heightened for them, like all of the symptoms that they might experience maybe earlier in the luteal phase become really heightened in that last couple of days or that last week.
Yeah, so common. Yeah, I see people also expressing like that buzziness, or if they have more estrogen kind of circulating around, we don't have the progesterone to counterbalance that. That helps us feel more calm and relaxed. That's a common one that I see too.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's so true. I know. Anyway, here we are on the mission to help people figure out their luteal phase problems.
Well, and I think I'd be interested to know, like, are there specific things that cause this lower progesterone, not lower, but obviously the deficiency, if we will, of that would create this kind of scenario between the estrogen and progesterone?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the, again, like don't blame the hormones, like look higher up, right? Look at what's really going on. And, as you were saying earlier, the psychological, physical stress that we are experiencing in our lives now, especially, I feel like especially with 2023, 2020 to 2023, I swear, like what is up, we're all like in an existential crisis, I think. And when you think about it, I just saw a report, not to get depressing, but I just saw a report that not depression, but suicide rates are higher than they've ever been in the history of the United States. Like just this last week, I think something about that came out. And my point in saying that is that to me is a marker of a society that is not well. And we were, and I think that it takes a remarkable amount of resilience to just cope with not only what's happening in our little world and our broader society, but what's happening in the world, particularly now. And so that psychological stress piece is so huge to me. I used to say nutrient deficiencies were the biggest problem. Now I'm like, nope, they're not. It really is what's happening on a psychosocial level, in my opinion. But obviously, nutrient deficiencies are a huge part of this, particularly the micronutrient deficiencies, the vitamins and the minerals. And then our, gut-related problems, low thyroid function, all of these are really big issues. So that contribute to the overall like ovarian dysfunction, and then the diagnoses, right? The low progesterone, the PMDD, the PMS, the luteal phase deficiency, all of these things. Like, yeah, well, you can say you've got all these problems, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because you got to treat the low-hanging fruit and you got to treat upstream.
And even that stress is also depleting our nutrient status too. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there. But like, I agree. Like we need that fundamental support, and yeah, work our way up from there.
I'm also just so grateful we're having this conversation and talking about like the grander mental health kind of relationship to these hormonal issues, because I think so often in general, when people think of women's health, they're thinking reproductive health, and so much of it is focused on fertility. But there's also a population of people who like either aren't interested in getting pregnant or aren't ready yet, or have already had children and are still experiencing issues. And so much of it does come back to like us as individuals too, not even thinking about the conception factor or the fertility factor of how it affects women as individuals and our mental well-being. Because I think we have to think of support ourselves first before we even think about that fertility and start to add the added stress of like, am I going to be infertile? Am I going to have a hard time getting pregnant? And all those pressures that are coming from the doctors with these symptoms and all the tests that exist today and all of that. But it's really is like a mental health issue and a mood issue, and like supporting that and making women realize that what I'm experiencing might not just be, I don't have to just be like, there's just something wrong with me here. It's really can come back to our whole beings and our whole self. And I don't know, I just think that's so important. I was having a conversation with someone recently and they're like, I don't want to have kids, but I feel like all of the women's health help out there is focused on fertility. So that was really interesting for me to hear and be like, like, I think it's important for us to talk about women on a grander scale than just like making babies too.
Yes. Can we please? As someone who does not have children in her 40s, yes, I would agree with that. And it's interesting that that was the reflection from the person you were speaking to, because I feel like that is definitely the main focus of so many practitioners in the women's health space is the fertility piece. And in my experience, and this was sort of like in my market research over the years, asking questions of my audience about, like what's their biggest fear of, if they don't deal with the problems that they've got. And the biggest fear is losing their fertility or not having the choice to have children if that's what they want to do. So many of them weren't sure whether they wanted it or not, but the loss of the choice was enough to drive them to buy things, to do things, to take action. And that honestly was by far, in my experience, the biggest fear that my audience has ever communicated to me. They don't really care too much about anything else but the potential loss of that choice, even though they might not want it at all. So there is really something, it's so intertwined in our identity. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
For me, it all boils down to quality of life. Like my whole practice is just built around quality of life. Like we have so much, hopefully, life outside of even if you choose your child rearing years. And my heart breaks for all the different lifestyle phases that we go through where there just is not support for our bodies. And again, for me, it's the quality of life side of things. If people are in perimenopause for a decade and their sleep sucks all the time, and how that's going to impact every single area of your life and your relationship and how you show up as a human. And why aren't we supporting that? Like it is so much more than just the potential to have a child.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. I could not agree with you more. I feel like our expectations for our health as women have been so lowered. They're practically down at zero. And it's because every life stage, right? We get the messaging that it sucks, right? Puberty is terrible. It's a nightmare. Being a teenager is also a nightmare. High school, oh God. High school girls, nightmare. We could go on. And then you're in your 20s and pregnancy is challenging. So you're going to have fertility problems. You might have fertility problems. So many girls are told that if they have PCOS, for instance, they're like, oh yeah, you're going to have a hard time getting pregnant. And then, and pregnancy is so challenging. And don't even get me started on childbirth because that's just a nightmare. And then postpartum, well, that really sucks too. And perimenopause, yeah, you may as well kill yourself. And then menopause, you're just dried up and old and you may as well just kill yourself again. Are you kidding me right now? It's just, how is it that every stage of the menstrual life cycle, we're told that it's just terrible and that you may as well just resign yourself to the terribleness of it and hope for the best in the next stage? I just can't. Just so many eye rolls. Drives me nuts.
It doesn't have to suck.
Yeah, exactly what Norah said. It's like quality of life. And I think that I would just like love more women to have that empowered feeling of, hey, me focusing on my hormone health, my menstrual health, my overall health, like it can be for me too, and not just like my future family, but me like thriving in my relationship with my partner, because perimenopause and menopause, like it gets harder to have intimacy and all of those things because of what's happening in our bodies. And that brings connection and all of those pieces play into all of this, our energy, like how we can have relationships, all of that. So I just think I like want women to listen to this and feel like, oh, it doesn't just have to be for my future fertility or that chance. Obviously, yes, we all want to have that opportunity if that's what we'd like, but I think it's also just having a fuller, exciting, more joyful life as well, and being able to really feel like we did our best with our bodies.
Yes, just like raising our expectations for, like you said, the quality of life, for our quality of life, and for, just our like day-to-day living. Because the feeling I just get is that, again, that so many women, particularly in that perimenopause window, have just resigned themselves to feeling like crap, and that's really it. And they've been they feel so defeated from their past healthcare experiences. They don't even know how to advocate for themselves, and they don't know what that looks like, and they don't even know who to go to begin with. So it's really it's a very unfortunate situation. But I feel like the tide is definitely changing, though. Like we're definitely on the right path and moving in the right direction, I feel like.
Yeah. Kind of on this note, I'd love for us to just kind of dive into ovulation quickly and talk about, ovulation is such a big one for conception. And right now we're kind of having that like conversation of like, it's not always about conception. So why is ovulation important, even if you're not trying to conceive?
Yeah, I always say to women when they're talking about fertility, fertility, freaking out about fertility, I'm like, these things are completely interchangeable, right? Like they are one and the same. And so I think the faster we move towards that mentality of your fertility is the same as healthy ovulation, healthy menstrual cycles. They're all one and the same. And your body, whether you like it or not, is aiming for fertility and being fertile and having a baby every single cycle. So it's, obviously it's up to you to do with that what you will, but your goal is to support that. I had a woman once tell me on Instagram, she was like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm not trying to support my fertility because I don't want children. I was like, no, wait, hold on. So we really have to bring those all together, and just be okay with the marriage of all of these aspects of our health. And so when you think about ovulation and you think about the fact that this vital process is happening on an almost monthly basis for most people, except for the irregular cycles ladies, so that's happening, and we are producing a tremendous amount of these important sex hormones, the testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and there are other hormones that play into it as well that fluctuate throughout the cycle, that are obviously based on the rhythm of the ovulatory cycle. So, we have all of that happening. And, I talked about progesterone a little bit, but, when I think about like for instance, the progesterone's effect on the mood, like I was talking about, right? Like progesterone produces something called allopregnanolone. So that's a neurosteroid, and that stimulates our GABA receptors, and GABA receptors in the brain are, once they are stimulated by this allopregnanolone, it creates this like remarkable calming effect on the body, right? So it has this incredible effect. And yet so many of us are so deficient in our progesterone because we're either not ovulating because of the stress, or we're ovulating irregularly. We're just not producing enough of it. And then we go, what sounds like or feels like crazy in that second half of our cycles. And we don't really know why, and no one can really tell us why, and we're offered an antidepressant. And so I'm just thinking, well, like what's going on with your ovulation? So, I think about that, just like that one little effect of progesterone. It's, downstream, it produces allopregnanolone, and that produces, or that affects your GABA receptors, and then that calms you down. Some people take GABA. So, there's ways to sort of dig a little bit deeper. So there's that. And then progesterone is amazing for our skin. It actually balances out the melanocytes that are produced, whereas estrogen is actually like a pusher of the melanocytes. So that's why, when I was on the pill, I had all this estrogen, no progesterone, I had melasma all over my face, all of that kind of makes sense. I think about, again, the brain, our sleep, our, like we talked about mood, but just our physical health. Like estradiol is incredibly important for vaginal tissue and, integrity of the vaginal tissue and vaginal lubrication so that we don't have painful sex, so that we stabilize our vaginal microbiome. There's all of that. And then there's also like hair and skin and nails. And then there's heart health and cardiovascular health. Yes, exactly. And muscle, right? So it's like basically everything that's in your body is impacted. I think we have receptors on, every single cell in our body for estrogen, which is why when you're in a low estrogen state, like on the pill or, when you get your period or right before your period, you don't feel so great. And those are, of course, exacerbated. And so I really just like want everyone to know that, first of all, your period is sort of like not the main star of the show. I call ovulation the star of the show. And it really is because, it's the thing that gives you your period, and you really wouldn't have one if you didn't have the ovulation piece. And also that, your period, again, is just a barometer of your overall health. It's just telling you something is going on with your health. And so it's not the problem. You got, like I said before, you've got to look upstream. And, and these hormones are so crucial to so much. And so I posted this video about this OBGYN who was calling me out about ovulation. And I did this podcast on ovulation and the importance of it. And not so much on the act of ovulation, because inherently there's no importance in the act, but it's what comes after it and comes before it that is so important. And so, we've got all of this, information about it, and yet, I don't know, she word saladed her way around like what I was trying to say, and then made herself look silly, but whatever. So my point here is that we're just getting such wrong information. It's just annoying. I don't know. I could go on.
No, I saw that post and I was like, oh my, she basically just like said what you said was wrong and then reiterated what you said to be right. And I was like,
I know. I couldn't believe it. That's why I had to make this video. I just couldn't believe it. I was so shocked that she said that. It was just really amazing to me. But yeah, I don't know. Thank God for social media.
I think about like some more like the bone health protective, the cardio protective, we talked about cognitive benefits, and like when you're on a lot of birth controls, you're not ovulating, so you're not getting these protective effects that we get from progesterone. And like for that reason alone, I wish I didn't miss out on a decade of that. Like I'm doing the things in my power now to support my bones and weight training and incorporating, of course, all the calcium and vitamin D and K foods that I can. But I wish that very vulnerable and important period of my life from 14 years old to 24 years old, I could have been getting all of those benefits back. It's such a short window to begin with that's, osteoporosis is such a common thing for women, even in younger ages now. So that's really like one of the bigger things that I think about too, is just like long-term impacts from that.
mm-hmm.
So true, right? It's so true. I think Laura Brydon talks about that, the depositing in your bank type of thing, and I couldn't agree with you more. I've always thought about that. Like, what are we? But when you're 21, when you're 18, you're not even thinking about the next year, much less 20 years down the line, right? We're all invincible at that age. I so remember those days. And, and so I think that it's hard to convince, especially younger girls who all they can think about is going on the pill because, you want to join the cool kids club. And, I definitely felt that way. I was so excited to be on the pill. I don't know about you both, but I definitely was. And there's just it's a cultural, revolution. Basically, it's like, this is the thing that you do. It's like a rite of passage. And I distinctly remember thinking that, thinking back on the loss of like, what have you lost out on? And you really only start to think about that when you're in your 30s and your 40s as things start to shift. Whoa, it's a shocking revelation. But yeah, I mean, I feel like Jerry Lynn Pryor has research on girls who are put on the pill as teenagers and that they don't achieve the bone development that someone who was not on the pill at that age would achieve. So there are, yeah, for sure, no doubt, significant issues. And then not to mention the side effects when like, for instance, with the progestin in the pill, that doesn't convert to allopregnanolone. So that's why I
You're
think
not
that's
getting
a
the
huge
benefits.
contributor. Yeah, to the mood issues that show up on the pill.
If you could tell someone, so someone's experiencing like either anovulatory cycles, luteal phase defect, that type of thing, what is like one or two things that you would want them to implement or change to try to support that?
Oh, girl. I feel like I have 1,000.
I know there's so many,
Yeah.
but like, what do you think has like a huge impact? And we've talked a lot about stress, like, all like, yeah.
Yes, I would 100%. I mean, depending on their situation, but in most cases, I always work on nervous system regulation. We work on the basics, right? Like you just start with what you can do. So maybe it's starting with eating breakfast with protein in it. Eating breakfast within an hour to an hour and a half after you've woken up. Maybe drinking, cutting out, or cutting down on your caffeine consumption, having it after you've eaten food. What can we do about what your sleep is like? What's your nighttime routine? What's happening with your sleep? Are you getting good sleep? So really thinking about all of those things too. And also thinking about how do you implement breaks throughout the day to sort of realign your nervous system, a little recalibrate your nervous system. So I feel like those are really big things. And there's, so many little pieces to that puzzle. And then yeah, like the nutrition side of things, like how can we control that? Like what can you do differently to support your blood sugar? Because your blood sugar, when it's dysregulated, as you both know, is such an internal stressor. And so what can we do to start to move the needle on your blood sugar? And in many cases, I have a client, wear a CGM, the back of their arm, a continuous glucose monitor for anyone who doesn't know what that is, so that they can really see in real time. I found my clients over the years really appreciate the data. And when they can see it very clearly, especially after, as you both know, right, never being really given any information, just being told, well, this is just how it is. They're like, oh, wait a second, I can see what's going on with my blood sugar. I can see what's going on with my stress if I wear an Oura ring or, some other device. That and my sleep as well. So when they can really measure it and see that tangible result, then I found that that's really useful. So those are the two low-hanging fruits that I usually start with.
Yeah, I feel like those are big ones for sure. And easy to implement, like super easy to make small changes there, like eating when you wake up or having a better sleep routine. All of those things, they're relatively like cost effective, and it just takes the discipline to implement.
Yes, it does. And also reminding women too that your body is not broken. Your body is sending you signals. It's not just inherently dysfunctional. Let's look at the outside world and talk about dysfunction. If your body is just responding exactly the way it's supposed to respond to the dysfunction, and also reminding them too that it's not going to take some like great massive effort. I mean, in some cases it might to start seeing results, because I think we've been led to believe that, right? Your body just isn't that great. There's something wrong with it. And then on top of that, it's going to take a huge amount of effort to fix the problems, when in fact, like you said, those small changes really, really add up. And that's what is always so surprising, I think, is that they just can't believe that one little thing that they did. Like one girl I had, she was like, I just started chewing my food properly. And I had a more regular period. Like, what? I was like, well, you calmed your nervous system down. That does it. So, people are always just stunned by this, because I think they've just been led to believe that it's going to take massive intervention for them to feel better.
It's also so common too that I see that a lot of times we have the answers. Like we know what we need the most, and then we just need to be asked. And then actually go out and do that thing. Like around sleep, people are like, I know I'm not getting very good sleep. And you're like, okay, how are we going to change that?
Right? I know. We just need someone to give us permission to do these things sometimes. Yes.
All right. We love to wrap up our episodes with our guests, let listeners get to know you a little bit more with a couple of lightning round questions. So I'm going to kick it off here and ask, what is your favorite meal to cook or consume?
Okay, so I'm really boring, but I really like usually in the summertime, a good barbecued steak and sweet potato and like salad, greens of some kind of veggies. So that's basically boring in me.
Not boring. I feel like that's like the perfect meal.
It is. So I know it's just so perfectly filling. I just love it.
Yeah. Do you prefer your AM or PM routine?
I would say my AM routine because I have more energy for it. So, yeah, I find that my AM routine, I find that there's a lot of pressure, right, to do this whole PM routine, and sometimes you just don't have the energy for it. And so, like, okay, well then focus on your morning and that set your day up that way. So, yeah, for me, it's just because it's sunlight's out, I have more energy for it.
Love and agree. What is your favorite period product of choice?
I would say my period underwear. That's really been a game changer in my life. I just tampons and pads were always just a pain for me. I'm my husband calls me like the most unprepared period girl, because I'm always forgetting these things. But period underwear just like goes with me wherever I go. It's like I'm traveling or something like that.
I still haven't tried period underwear.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I need to do it.
Yeah, girl, you need to. Definitely. There's so many good friends.
I was going to say, Nicole, you have to borrow some of that like middle school Nicole energy that brought pads with her all around in her backpack. Where is she?
It's so true. I don't understand why I have not channeled her. I know. When I think about her intuition around her body, like take me back to my 11-year-old self because I knew what was up. I know. It's so true. I appreciate you reminding me of that.
Okay, last question is what is one book that has had significant impact on you?
I would say from a women's health perspective, I would say Christiane Northrup's book, The Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, that I read that I didn't read all of it, be honest, because it's a Bible. It really, I read it in like 2009-ish or so, and that was really sort of like my segue into women's health. I was just completely blown away by the concept she presented in it. I had never heard of anything like that. And so that really was the impetus for me to move from more of like generic health coaching into the women's health realm. And I found it to be tremendously enlightening.
Amazing. Well, Nicole, we are so grateful for your time today and for you sharing with our community. Thank you so much.
Thanks, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. I've loved this conversation. You both are amazing. Thank you, thank you. And thank you for all the work you do in the world, too.
Yeah, and real quick, too, please share where people can find you and find your book and all of that goodness.
Yeah, you can find me on NicoleJardim.com. I have my blog on there, programs. My book is on fixyourperiod.com, but you can find it really where books are sold, generally speaking, hopefully. For the most part. And you just never know. And I'm on Instagram a lot of the time, so you can find me there. It's Nicole M. Jardim. I also have a podcast called The Period Party, so lots of options for anybody who is trying to figure out what's going on with their period. That's the book right there if you're looking for it.
Love it.
Amazing. Everyone go follow Nicole. Her content is always so informative and inspiring. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.